Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will discuss about the FDA regulated drug series and particularly talking about the drugs. So let's jump on to the next slide. So what are my objectives today? So today I'll be discussing about the overall drug definition given by FDA and its research applicability. And I'm also discussing about the IRB's role in FDA drug research related. And the second part of the presentation is given by Raj, where he discusses about the IND submission process and the sponsor investigator support guidance. Next slide, please. So the definition of drug given by FDA, what it is. So it is a test article or substance which is a therapeutic agent or biological products, and how it is recognized. It is recognized by US Pharmacopoeia or formulary. And what is the purpose or the intent of the drug? It is used in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of the disease, and also to affect the structure or any function of the body. So, like compounds administered to blunt or provoke a physiological response, or to study the mechanism of the action or metabolism of the drug, which is pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of the drug, can be considered as drugs and part of the component of the medicine, not the device, only the medicine that can be considered as drugs. Next slide, please. So we all know when we see the Neutrogena sunscreen. So does anyone know this has a drug? And yes, this has a drug as per the definition of FDA because sunscreens are intent for prevention of sunburns. And so it does provide the definition of FDA for the drug. Next slide, please. So here's some of the most commonly seen, and do we know that it has the drug and it is approved by FDA? So yes, the Neosporin or clotrimazole cream or any kind of Vicks vapor up or hand sanitizer, they all have drugs as per the definition of FDA. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about what is the biological product. It can be a live attenuated agent or derivative from biological entities which are used for therapy. And this is an agent mostly applicable in the treatment, prevention, or any kind of cure for a disease and condition of human beings. So that can be called as a biological product, which is the definition of the drug. Next slide, please. So some of the examples of the biological products like blood derivatives, whole blood components, are some of the proteins like human tissues or xenotransplantation products or gene therapies, which is used for uh, gene medicine. So that can be considered as biological products and are defined as per FDA. Those are called drugs. So next slide, please. So now let's think about the use of these test articles in research. So the FDA describes the use of test articles in research as a clinical investigation. So here is a closer look at the definition of a clinical trial according to the FDA. An experiment in which a drug is administered or dispensed to or used involving one or more human subjects. For the purposes of IND regulation, investigational new drug regulations, an experiment is any use of drug, whether approved or unapproved, except for the use of a marketed drug in the course of medical practice or standard of care practice, is called a clinical investigation. Next slide, please. So what are the FDA roles and responsibilities? So we all know FDA is a regulatory agency and it always regulates the safety and effectiveness of the drug marketed in the US. And how does it review that? How does it reviews and how does it regulate? By a new drug application process. Whenever you have a new drug, you will submit a new drug application to FDA. And what does it review? It reviews safety and effectiveness of the drug, proposed use, and appropriateness of the proposed labeling, and adequacy of manufacturing methods to assure drug's identity, strength, quality, and purity of that drug. And we all know FDA audits every part of the study or research related. So like drug related problems, clinical investigation, the proposal, research related to drugs and devices, labeling, manufacturing site, clinical study site, etc., to ensure that safe and effective drugs are available to improve the public health. Next slide, please. So today I'm not going to talk about the entire drug development process, but IRB review is required during certain time points in the drug development process, where you can see I have circled two things, the IND and the approval. So IRB is involved in approving research when it is used in IND. IRB review may also be required after IRB approval for post-marketing surveillance. Next slide, please. So what are the IRB responsibilities in drug-related research? So the FDA has given the IRB much more responsibilities to constitute that formally designated to review and to monitor biomedical research which involves human subjects. And the first studies involving drugs, the IRB responsibility is to review drugs being used in research to determine if the use is being used as in accordance with the FDA approved labeling or not. So if they are not used for approved labeling, then there are two things which needs to be considered for IND requirements from exemption or whether the study drug requires an IND. Next slide, please. So here is the depiction of the ERB system where you will see we have three categories: FDA unapproved drugs, FDA approved drugs with an FDA approved use, and FDA approved drugs with an unapproved use. So in the ERB system, you will see these categories. Next slide, please. So we'll discuss one by one. So the first one is FDA approved with FDA approved manner. So how do we say FDA approved manner? So assuming no marketing approval application is planned, this happens mostly in phase 4 studies where you already have the FDA approval and you're just reviewing the post-marketing experience is being documented for new information and long-term outcomes. That's when FDA approved for approved use will be applicable. Next slide, please. So what are the documentation reviewed by IRB? So mostly the package insert because you are using the drug in accordance with FDA approved manner. And for this type of drugs, we doesn't require IND, only the package insert and not even IB, investigator brochure. And where does you find the package insert? Mostly when you go to the FDA website, if you click any FDA approved drugs, you can easily get the package insert. Next slide, please. So the next slide is about what does the information required in ERB system for FDA approved drugs for approved use. So this is a slide which shows about what kind of information we are going to look. So the packages insert can be applicable in 16.4. You can upload the document over there. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what is an investigational drug. So it is an test article that is not approved in the US as a drug. An approved drug that is not used according to the approved label are used in a combination of approved drugs that can be considered as investigational drug. So there's a note. Most of the medical physicians are standard of care allows a physician to use any approved drug without prior regulatory approval. Next slide, please. So what is the FDA approved drug in an unapproved manner. So what do we see in this? So most of the times FDA already given the approval for certain indication. And if you are changing that indication, that is called off label. If you're not using what proposed in that approved drug for approved use, then it is called off label. And for that, does the IND requirements is applicable? Yes. And it also depends on what kind of IND requirements, like IND exemption or whether we do require IND. So who will decide that? Can you go to the next slide, please? So FDA allows investigator to make the determination of IND exempt, but you do need to submit for IRB review for final determination. So whether it requires IND exemption or whether it requires IND. So here we discuss about the IND determination of drug being exempt from IND requirements. So how does it require? So a clinical investigation of a marketed drug is exempt from the IND requirements if all of the below criteria are met, like exemption from 21 CFR 312.2b are met. So whether it is a lawfully marketed drug not intended for new indication or to use for changes in labeling, not intended for change in advertising, investigation doesn't involve, there is a change in route administration. There is no change in dose. There is no change in patient population or other factors that increases risk or decrease acceptability of the risk associated with the use of the drug and is not intended to promote, commercialize the product. That's when the IRB makes the determination that it met the IND requirements for exemption. So this will require the investigator provide a rationale on how the use of the FDA approved drug in an off-label manner doesn't involve change in route of administration dose or patient population or other factors like increased risk or decreased acceptability of risk associated with the use of drug. So the ultimate decision is given by IRB. Next slide, please. So for this section, in ERB system, we'll see in 17.1, where you will see approved drugs for unapproved use. So what is the IRB requirement? So mostly if the IND requirements from exemption, we will ask for package insert, or if it is IND required, then they need to provide IB investigator brochure. So you can upload that documentation in 17.9 at the below. You can see that. And other requirements are already stated as per in the ERB system. Next slide, please. So if the IRB doesn't agree with IND exemption or drug or biologic not FDA approved, that's when we will say the IND required, and it goes for the IND submission process for FDA, and FDA provides the IND requirements as well. Next slide, please. So what are those kind of drugs? Those are unapproved drugs or biologics, and sometimes the approved drugs for unapproved use. So here is a section for unapproved drugs, and this is a section 15.1 in ERB system. So there are a lot of questions and what are the requirements for IRB to review. And if you have any kind of questions related to this, you can always contact IRB. And the next slide provides, when you go to the next slide. So what are the types of IND? We have three types of IND and we have two categories of IND. So investigator IND, emergency use of IND, and treatment IND. So for the investigator IND, it is unapproved drug and unapproved product for a new indication or new patient population or new dose that can be submitted as investigator IND, which is submitted by physician, both initiates and investigates the new drug. And emergency use of IND, which is used in emergency situations, and there is a treatment IND, which is used mostly in the serious or immediate life-threatening situations. And the two categories are commercially available IND, and these are for FDA approved drugs for in an approved manner, and that can be used for clinical safety and effectiveness needed. And there is one more research and research categories, which permits the sponsor to use drug in research to obtain advanced scientific knowledge of new drug. And there is no plan to market these kind of products. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So if the studies involve IND, what does the documentation and what does the requirements for IRB to review? So we always need a FDA IND acknowledgement letter or a confirmation from the sponsor a valid IND is included with the IND number for the study. And this can be referenced in a protocol or investigator brochure. And there is a clear description of the drug or a biological product. And it also investigates with the reports of any kind of prior investigations happened with that product, or there is an investigational plan, a protocol, or research project proposal, and also the subject selection criteria for these kind of research, and also a plan for monitoring procedures and consent forms, and also any other information that requires IRB review to conduct its review and make determination. So when you submit a new FDA drug-related research, please keep this in mind and provide all required documentation for IRB to make a determination. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is about, sorry, 1 second. So this is the decision tree which is used as a tool in helping you to decide whether an IND is required. So the first line, when a proposed research study plans to use an unapproved drug or biologic, you will need to obtain IND prior to submission to the IRB. And when it is involved with an approved drug or biologic being used for an approved manner, evidence must be provided in order for the IRB to make a determination that the submission is exempt from IND submission requirements, or that an IND has been obtained for the use in the proposed research study. So please, for these situations, when an investigator wants to conduct research using a FDA regulated test article, whether an IRB determined an IND is required or FDA has not approved to use, then UT Southwestern has a regulatory support team that can assist with IND submission. So in the next part of the presentation, Raj is going to provide that information and also IND submission process and required documentation. And I will give it to Raj.
Thank you, Satish and Erica. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to focus on two aspects of the FDA process and IND by expanding on the information presented by Satish. Number one, the FDA regulatory process for drugs. And number two, how the UT Southwest Regulatory Support Office could assist sponsor investigator teams when going through the FDA process. Next slide, please. So let us see what an IND is. The general definition is, it is a form of federal authorization for sponsor investigators to pursue studies or treatments involving human subjects and drug products. Operationally, there are three distinct phases in the IND life cycle, which correspond to the life cycle of a study. The first phase is starting from study planning to IND preparation. The second phase extending from IND submission to IND approval. And the third phase running aftermath of IND approval during the course of the study until its conclusion. In practice, we recognize multiple task-oriented milestones within these distinct phases, which the studies need to go through in a compliant and timely way. The process can be sometimes complex or would require a little bit of assistance. This is where the SI support team can help you. The following slides will explain some details regarding the milestones and tasks and how the SI support can assist the investigator team needs. Next slide, please. The UT Southwest HRPP Regulatory Office has created a website that serves as an instant online resource for guidance information, illustrative document templates, in addition to background information for several different activities associated with the IND. The site has online links to the FDA sites as well for downloading specific forms. Investigator teams may contact us by email or booking a meeting with our staff to engage in a one-on-one discussion on the IND needs. This booking will block the time directly in our calendars for a virtual meeting. Next slide, please. The initial meeting can be very valuable. It is because this meeting enables us to collectively take a look at what it would entail on the regulatory side early during the planning stage in order to execute the study in a compliant and efficient manner. In other words, two things are very important. Number one, understanding the overall process and requirements. And number two, how best to utilize the sponsor investigator support for various tasks and milestones. Most of my talk is going to be on the process associated with the research IND, such as assembling various application components, organizing content for specific documents, and completing the application submission, leading to the FDA approval. Next slide, please. Now let us turn towards the IND application package. The package will be assembled by compiling one set of documents prepared by the investigator teams and bringing a second set of documents from external sources. For most investigator prepared documents, our website provides templates to get started, which you can download, and also the online links for specific forms to download from the FDA sites. If additional study sites will be involved for the proposed study, a site investigator is needed, and that person will provide an additional FDA Form 1572 along with their credentials to be included in the application. Since the documents from the external sources could take some significant time to arrive, it is a good idea to get all the requests sent out to people and organizations really early. Sometimes the contacts you reached out to may have questions, or they may request a formal study plan before providing a cross-reference letter to the previous IND or sharing an investigator brochure or package insert. By the way, the package insert is requested from the manufacturer for all the investigational drugs which have not been FDA approved, whereas for most of the approved drugs, they are downloadable from online. In the next couple of slides, I will describe how the main document and the FDA forms are prepared, which constitute the vital pieces of the whole application. Next slide, please. Let me walk you through the main application. It is structured with 8 sections. The first 4 sections on the left-hand side of the column are prepared by the investigator team, and the remaining 4 sections are completed with the help of information received from the external sources. Next slide, please. In this slide, there is a breakdown of the sections within the main document. As you see, the sections, the subsections, and all the other pieces within the subsections, you can recognize them readily because these would jog your memory to some of the document sources that you are familiar with. For instance, you can extract information from the investigator prepared sections from grant applications or upcoming manuscripts or unpublished data and clinical protocol. Content for the remaining sections can be minimal for research INDs. This is because most information is cross-referenced to a previous IND or extracted from an investigator brochure or package insert. Next slide, please. The FDA forms are the next vital piece of the application package. They provide different elements of administrative framework associated with the study site, and the investigators. Essentially, 3 forms are needed that need to be submitted with the information filled appropriately, signed and dated by the investigator. Form 1571 is about the general administrative details. Form 1572 provides investigator statement for the conduct of clinical research specific to the site. So there are multiple sites, multiple 1572s with the investigators, the site investigators need to be submitted. Form 3674 deals with the certification of compliance with the requirements of clinicaltrials.gov data bank. Other FDA forms may be needed for investigators' financial interest disclosure and certification, which can be discussed with the a sponsored investigator support. Next slide, please. Let's now look at the IND submission process in the next few slides. IND applications can be directed to the Center for Drug Evaluation Research or Center for Biologics Evaluation Research. These are called CDER and CBER, respectively. These 2 centers represent principal divisions in the FDA, which are responsible for regulatory governance of drug products and chemical agents. Each division processes different categories of agents and receives the submissions differently. So it is important to know the type of drug agent you have in the IND to target the right division you send the IND to. If you don't know your drug category to target the right division, no problem. The sponsored investigator support can help you. IND submissions to CDER division is through an online hub called CDER NextGen Portal, which is a recently developed software capability. For submissions targeting CBER division, there is no comparable portal yet, and email route is the only submission path. The FDA receives email submissions directed to CBER at the CBER Document Control Center. Just to make you aware, these submission paths have currently replaced the classical paper submission route, which was in practice for a long time. Next slide, please. Now, having understood the submission path, let's see how to appropriately finalize the document files and make them submission ready and be compliant with the sponsored investigator support policy. First is the file format. Documents should be in PDF or MS Word files. No zip files or other forms of compressed files are accepted by the FDA. Formatted files should be saved with a document by following a certain FDA recommended naming convention, which includes the IND number 000 for initial submission, then the investigator last name, then the type of the name of the document, and the name of the drug, followed by the date, which includes 2 digits of month, 2 digits of the date, and 4 digits of the year. And in between month, date, and year, there is a hyphen, and between the words, there is an underscore. The second aspect to check is the IND application package size limit. This is to be checked for both portal as well as email submissions. FDA allows a 40 megabyte size application package for portal submissions and a 125 megabyte size for the email submissions. The 125 megabyte submission can be split into multiple emails, with each email not exceeding 25 megabyte. And please note, the FDA does not accept any secured emails except when they specifically instruct the submitter to do so. Now, turning to the compliance with the SI support submission policy. According to our policy, IND submissions can be done directly by the investigator teams or through the SI support, which I will explain in the next slide. If the investigator teams elect to submit an IND on their own, SI support expects them to send us the finalized documents in advance. That is prior to submission, or at least immediately after that. This is for us to maintain shadow files of the submissions in the archive for any future need. Next slide, please. Let me talk about the CDER NextGen portal a little bit. The portal enables IND submission through a pre-signed and registered account. Since the system is relatively new, I have an account set up on behalf of the SI support office for campus-wide assistance. Anytime, the investigator can create their own account for the submissions. The nicety of the system is that it enables submission of not only the initial IND application, but all the ensuing submissions as well, which will be tied to that particular application. The portal submission currently serves for one-way communication only, which means no responses are received at the portal. The responses from the FDA arrive by email. Next slide, please. For portal submissions, the FDA sends out an automated acknowledgement email to the submitter moments after the submission. This notification comes with a unique ID for each submission, which is called the event number, the event ID. Then it also indicates the number of files that were included in the submission. So this will serve as a checkpoint for making sure that you have included all the files that you wanted to submit. Missing files can be added subsequently, and any technical issues can be reported to the management. So the acknowledgement is actually received by the submitter, and it includes the submitter information, submitter name, and the email address. For CBER email submissions, there is no acknowledgement in a formal way. They receive an email, and sometimes that email is delayed or it's not even received. SI support can follow up with the FDA if there is no acknowledgement or any sort of communication from the agency, even after a week. Next slide, please. The application submission opens a review phase. This is a crucial step that leads to IND approval. It lasts for 30 days, and during the review period, the FDA may request revisions, explanations, or answers to specific questions with the typical 24 to 72 hour turnaround time. Responses to information requests are sent to the FDA in reply back email. In addition, responses may need to be submitted through the portal if the application was initially submitted through the portal. The investigator team should be on a high alert during this review period, not only because of the compressed turnaround time for the responses, but also for a reason that for some investigators, this can be an unfamiliar process for putting together the responses. So it is highly recommended that during the review, the investigator team keep up with the SI support contact and also maintain the frequency so the assistance can be provided in a timely fashion. Two results are possible at the end of the review period. With the satisfactory responses provided for all the FDA requests, the agency will grant IND approval in the form of a study may proceed notification. When concerns and issues are not satisfactorily addressed during the 30-day cutoff time, the IND will be placed on a clinical hold until the pending items are fully addressed. The hold will be cleared and the IND approval is granted once the satisfactory responses are received by the FDA. The approval letter for the study may proceed notification serves as an important IND record and a means to initiate the IRB contact as a prelude to the institutional regulatory requirements to take care next. Next slide, please. Post-approval of IND is yet another elaborate phase with the critical milestones until the study is completed. So we have decided to have an exclusive future presentation for that topic to cover the details in some depth. Nevertheless, just to give a sort of preview, the IND maintenance through finish. This phase may entail making modifications to study approach, reporting the occurrence of some unforeseen safety issues, submitting scheduled annual reports and some other time-sensitive communications. Further, studies may also warrant investigators' action for specific FDA compliance. For instance, agency can send out queries. They can schedule audits. And sometimes situations such as investigators exiting the institution when they are holding an IND. So these are some special situations that need to be addressed with the help of certain document submissions or some reviews or some other form of support that will be certainly available from the sponsor investigator support. So in general, the sponsor investigator support is very well equipped to assist the investigators during all these different areas, during all these different processes, which we will discuss in the future. Next slide, please. In summary, I want to bring back one of the earlier slides to stress the points. Number one, there are three important phases in the IND life cycle, from the start until the completion of a study. Each phase comprising multiple critical milestones. And number 2 is the Sponsor Investigator Support Office provides regulatory assistance for the different activities so the investigator teams can complete various tasks to keep up the momentum in their study efforts. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I want to recap my presentation, driving home some key message. First one is the investigator teams can contact the sponsor investigator support during any phase of the IND process, from the initial planning to study closing. Since maintaining appropriate compliance and achieving timely submissions are very important for the investigator teams, seeking assistance from the SI support through email or booking one-on-one meetings can prove to be highly valuable. Our website serves as an important resource for various IND requirements, providing document templates, guidance documents, and links to FDA sites for downloading forms or for finding additional guidance for a specific process. Last but not the least is the maintenance of shadow files of your submission in our archive, which can serve as a vital resource as well if any future need arises to access certain documents. With that, I conclude my presentation and wish to thank you all before taking any questions.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Satish. And so this does conclude our presentations for today's session. Please submit any questions you have now. While we wait for you to get those questions typed up, I just want to take a moment to remind you of the survey. If you can just spend a few minutes to complete the questions, we will use the information to improve the content of these sessions and how we present them. We will also be able to see what areas we need to work on in the office and what areas we are excelling in. And just a reminder, we will be sharing the slides with you. We will send them out via the listserv, and you can also access them on our Research Matters website. Okay, so I don't see any questions coming in at this time, but you can still submit your question. We'll hang out a little bit after we end the session, and we'll be able to answer your question if you do have one. So just want to thank all of our presenters today, and thank you all for attending. The next Research Matters session is scheduled for August 16th, and so we just want to wish you all a great rest of your week. Thank you.